Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here for a free Zoom webinar, Communicating with Empathy, collaboration with Nuffield Counseling together with Nuffield Academy. So today we are going to be presenting Zahira Masood. She's the Principal Counselor for Nuffield Counseling. Zahira, our guest speaker, is the Principal Counselor at Nuffield Counseling. She has a master's degree in professional counseling and works with adults, adolescents, couples, and families on a broad range of mental health conditions, such as stress, anxiety, depression, and bipolar disorder. So I'd like to introduce Zahira and hand it over to Zahira. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaddafi. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me here today in another series of our webinars supporting mental health at your workplace. As you know, my name is Zahira and I'm the Principal Counselor with Nuffield Counseling. Okay, so before I start, we have a 15-minute question and answer segment at the end of the webinar where you can ask me anything about the topic today. Meanwhile, you can also post your question on the chat box, but I won't be looking at it while the webinar is on, but I promise you that I will answer any of your questions towards the end of the session. Okay, so let's begin. So as you know, today's topic is communicating with empathy, and here are the topics that I'll be sharing with you today. Give me a second. Okay, so I will be covering defining empathy in the workplace and why is it important, ways to show empathy at the workplace, how leaders can encourage empathy in the workplace. Okay, so before we move on to the webinar, I have a little activity which I'm gonna let all of you participate. I'm gonna read out 3 statements and I need you to think, feel, and reflect on the statements shown on the next slide. Okay, so the first one would be, I often have concerns for people who are less fortunate than me. Second one is, I try to listen to both sides of the story before making a conclusion. And the last one would be, I tend to go out of the way to help others who are struggling at work. Okay, so how do you feel about these statements? Does any of these statements resonate with you? If it does, then you're experiencing empathy. Think back to the last time you helped someone who's in need and how you feel about it. Did you feel slightly upset about what that person is going through? Or maybe, when you're at home, you'll be thinking about what does it feel like to be in that person's shoe? This is what we'll be talking about today, empathy and how we can communicate with each other through this skill. So let us begin. Empathy is, relatively an understudied topic. We know that empathy is about emotion and in particular, about emotional connection. So as you know, having the ability to understand the needs of others and being aware of their feelings and emotions and thought is what empathy is all about. Okay, so it is one of those things that we like to think is like a natural quality. So if I say that you don't have empathy, it's more like I'm saying that you're not a nice person. So unfortunately, many of us don't use empathy in a effective way, especially in our communications at work. One distinct reason I would think would be, the need to put up a front in front of our peers and bosses to get through the day, which can leave a little room for empathy. Some think that showing empathy will make them feel somewhat incompetent and weak in front of others, or that by trying to make, trying to understand perspectives, we might, just end up being undecisive. So some may also cause like unnecessary drama at work. Truthfully, it really doesn't work that way. So if we consciously practice empathy, then we are communicating. We're not just batting back opinions in a way that's ineffective and quickly escalate into misunderstandings and hostile working relationship. All right. So defining empathy in workplace. Empathy in the context of workplace setting, I would say it simply means that that your people are able to establish true, empathetic, authentic connections with one another that enhance relationships and work performance. It is really important to remember there is a two distinct difference between sympathy and empathy, and it's mostly, often confused. Sympathy is basically, uh, uh, it's more of feelings of pity for the other person without really understanding what it's like to be in their situation. Whereas empathy, on the other hand, refers to the capacity or the ability to understand or imagine oneself in a situation of the other person, experiencing emotions, ideas, and opinion of that person. Empathy in the workplace is often more productive and supportive. It's the ability to see what it is like for the other person, and understanding their perspective and how that person's see their world as. So it's more on being sensitive of their feelings and, being more understanding in what they're going through. So importantly, I think empathy is also about understanding yourself too, so that you can appreciate how you're coming across to the other person and how you're behaving in certain situations. So if you want to communicate with people easily and productively, then make a conscious effort to use empathy in all your encounters at work. Consider things coming from the other person's perspective. Also, look at non-verbal signals, whether it's a body language. We all give off little things that can reveal much about what the other person is going through, even though they're not saying it out loud to you. Okay, so often an aggressive response that comes from the other person comes from a place of fear and worry. So to be able to recognize and speak about someone's fear can immediately take that heat out of the difficult situation. So why is empathy important at workplace? Some of these may sound obvious, but we are often quite guilty of only really showing empathy to people that we can relate to, or certain type of peoples that we have more connection with, right? So in generally, people who are a bit more like us, or someone that has the same background or responsibility, at work. So to really communicate effectively at work, you need to make sure you're taking time to understand the perspective of others who are completely the opposite of you. Colleagues who have different concerns about their age, sex, gender, background, home life, or just their nature. Or probably I would say people who have a totally different job role as you. For example, if you're in creative department and they're in the finance department, someone who's totally opposite of you. Okay, so employee empathy is important in any workplace setting, especially now we are continuing, as we are still continuing to navigate through the COVID-19 pandemic. Many of us are feeling exhausted most of the time than we normally would be experiencing. And there's a lot more high stress at work after coming back, all this time, being isolated at home. We somewhat feel disconnected from each other in a way. So a workplace that refuses to foster relationships built on trust, mutual respect, and empathy can't be sustained for long. A diverse and inclusive workplace promotes a more compassionate ecosystem, which is, respecting each and every one of its employees. So once you develop empathy at a workplace setting, you can connect with your coworkers and clients to build lasting relationships with them. And this relationship will be based on trust and support. One of the examples of empathy in the workplace would be, I think this is quite familiar to all of us, it would be an appraisal meeting, right, with your manager. You'll expect your manager to be attentive, kind, and guiding you on how to be better at your job. But instead, if they're dismissive and unreceptive, it might completely alter the way you approach your work in the future. I know that some might even resign due to to the cold and uncooperative environment. So it is important to nurture a work environment that is well attuned to the emotional well-being and mental health of its employees. I want everyone to take note of this. Why it's really, really important for you too is because you can become, if you employ more empathy at work, you can become indispensable part of your team. Being perceptive to other people's emotions and identifying what's bothering your teammate or your team members can share, it can, where you can share the workload to ease and pressure, the pressure of work can contribute to a healthy team structure. So the organization would benefit immensely if teams are driven by mutual respect. You'll be keener to work towards achieving your organizational goals when you get along with everyone on your team. Okay, so ways to show empathy at workplace. This is a time where we need to be connected again, all right? So to be able to understand others who are in need of emotional support so that we can work with them in ways that they are sensitive and appropriate. If you make the effort to use more empathy at workplace, you can understand where others are coming from, what's their perspective like, and this can open up lines of communication and develop more rewarding relationship with your colleagues that will transform your working life too. And you can break out of that culture that can too often be based on like-minded cliques or tribes working in opposition to each other. So showing empathy in your encounters at work doesn't mean you back off or give in to a viewpoint which is wrong, but I would say it means being able to appreciate what's motivating someone to take a stance so that you can talk to them more productively. If you can show willingness to listen and possibly adapt your own ideas with mindful discussions, you'll be able to gain respect and trust of the other person. Many of us are quite unclear on how to use empathy at work, but it's not that hard. If you're someone who listens to your coworkers or customers, when they have a problem and understand where they're coming from, and you are sensitive to their emotions, you are an empathetic person. So first, I would say approach problems from a different perspective. Imagine the problem or situation of whatever that person is going through from their perspective. Even if you don't reach the same conclusion as they did, you'll be able to have a better understanding or of their thought process, which can inform future discussions. Second would be ask questions to understand what's going on. Okay. What have led to this particular conclusion. Consider the potential of underlying factors that can cause the person to feel the way they do. If you're speaking with a buyer who is unhappy with a service, for example, ask them about what their expectations are like of the service and the specifics of their negative experience to have a better understanding of what's going on. If you don't understand the situation, keep asking questions in a simpler way so that you can understand the perspective of the other person. So empathy comes with a deeper understanding of what has happened. Okay. So the third I would say is validate how the person is feeling. In your interactions, repeat the concerns of the person you're dealing with so that you know what they're going through. For example, if you're working with a co-worker or colleague who's having a bad day, tell them that it's a frustrating experience for them, acknowledge those feelings and let them know that this is an appropriate way to feel. Okay. The fourth one I would say, determine the preferred resolution, taking time to understand their desired goal is a great way to show empathy. Ask questions and practice active listening when someone is trying to communicate a challenge that they are facing. This is particularly, I would say, is really useful in customer service, where the customer would prefer a new product or refund. It is the ultimate goal for you to, understand where they're coming from, so you can empathize better and you can see the individual's goal and know what they're working towards. Okay, number 5 is develop your listening skills. Ask questions, practice, the non-verbal encouragement such as eye contact, discuss an experience, that you're not familiar with, and ask them how that made them feel. Though you may not have this experience yourself, your understanding of what the other person is going through can make you have greater empathy for others who find themselves facing similar situations in the future. So the 6th would be offer to help. Ask your colleagues if they need help for a difficult project, or offer assistance when you can. It isn't always obvious when a coworker is struggling. So part of empathy is to really, really observe your environment and taking the time to offer help before they ask for it. Okay. Lastly, I would say challenge your biasness. It is natural for all of us to gravitate towards people who are similar to us, but you learn more when you have conversations with people who are outside your inner circle, taking time to understand, colleagues who you don't usually interact with can also help you understand different perspective, since you'll be communicating with people who don't necessarily share the same problem solving approaches. You can develop empathy in workplace settings with intuition, self-awareness, and presence of mind. Okay, so here are some of the examples of how you can communicate with empathy at workplace. Okay, one example I would say for example, a shipment is due on Monday and you get a notification on Friday that the last few boxes containing whatever products have been damaged. And because it's the weekend and everyone's out of office, you have no idea what to do. In this situation, for example, your colleague or co-worker steps up and agree to visit the delivery company with you to handle the situation, regardless of the fact, it's your task alone. Your co-worker is able to understand and empathize with you, right? So that's one example of empathy, so that you are able to resolve the issue that you have on hand with the help of someone else. Okay. The other thing an example I can think of would be, imagine if you are at working in a telecommunication service center. A 65-year-old customer came to you with an issue of their 5G network, and once you hear them out, you realize that they had accidentally put their phone on an airplane mode. So instead of making fun of them or chastising them or looking down on their silly error, you sit with them to understand and fix, show them how to fix the network. Take a few minutes to explain to them how they can do this. If it happens again, you are actually exhibiting empathy. You are showing empathy. Okay, so these are just some examples that I can think of. Okay, so the next slide would be, how can you communicate with empathy in the workplace? I'm sorry, I'm facing a little bit of technical issue here, so pardon me if I had moved on too fast. Okay, so empathetic communication involves both accepting and allowing different perspective and emotions in other people. Also sharing with them to enable encouragement and support. It is also the practice of active listening in an effort to understand the emotions with who you're communicating with. So aside from cultivating an inclusive workplace, data-driven support of an empathetic communication, it's also a good business decision. Okay, so as you know, communication is how humans relate to each other, a process of giving and receiving words, sounds, body language, facial expression, eye movement, tone of voice, and so on. A shift in any one of these elements can create a shift on how the messages is being received or experienced by the other person. And these shifts inform how the messages are intended and may be responded by the other person, as well as assumptions about their intent. To communicate peacefully requires a person to become conscious of habitual automatic responses of aggression and competition. And these consciously then, you can choose types of communication instead of you can demonstrate respect and empathy towards others and honor the dignity that is inherent to their how they feel. Okay, so the first step toward empathetic communication is a willingness to listen and in an openness to engage free flowing conversation that prioritizes the well-being of the person that you're talking to. So benefits of the communicating with empathy, I would say, is using empathy in your communications can make you have better understanding of the needs of your colleagues and the beneficiaries, less troubling conversations in terms of dealing with hostile situations at work or conflicts, an ability to predict where and how a situation could escalate, better powers of persuasion and motivation, gain respect as someone who's strong, confident, and confident enough to listen to alternative viewpoints, no more silos based on long held misunderstanding and failed communications. Okay, so 5 tips to communicate with empathy is respond in a timely manner to show concern of your target audience, whether it's a global crisis or whether to support a customer who's having an issue, addressing the issue promptly, show people that you're genuinely care about how they're feeling. Next would be take inspiration from reflective listening rather than just simply saying that I understand your concerns. Try to pair your understanding with a reflection of the context that is causing people to react in a particular way. Often it means adding additional sentence like, I see where you're coming from. I would feel the same way too if I'm experiencing what you're experiencing, without relying on interpretation or verbalizing someone's feelings back to them in your own words. Help people feel not only heard, but also being understood. Okay, so the next one would be acknowledge people's subjective experience. Even if you disagree, we know the recent changes in, you can say, things like, the recent changes in your terms and conditions may make some people uncomfortable. However, you can rely on us to provide you with that support so that, we can have a clear understanding of what's the flexible options available for you. These are some of the statements that you can actually say to your client or to your colleague. Okay, the next one would be accountable. Regardless of the intention behind your communication, your organization should take responsibility for how your content affects people, even if it elicits an undesired reaction. Use emotive language in content, responsibility. Use an emotional analysis tool if you have to. Make sure that you're not unnecessarily evoking fear or anger to prompt a reaction from your target audience. So empathetic communication skills are vital for both internal and external communication for employees and customers. Use these tips to develop your communication skills and put them to practice. Next time you chat with your coworker or colleague, make an effort to practice reflective listening to demonstrate that you understand where they're coming from or whatever they're saying. Or when you write an email or text to someone, make sure think about emotional expression and how it might affect the receiver. Okay, so it is easy to become complacent and forget about the nuances of working with people. Humans are creatures of habits, I would say. So it's difficult to adopt a new stance or alter your ways. But with proper insight and willingness to change, you can develop empathy at work. Another example, I would say you can use statement such as empathetic statements such as I know you have put so much time and effort into this. It can be frustrating to see the projects shut down. These are just some examples that, things that you can say to show empathy. Okay, so uncertainty is really hard. This has to be confusing and discouraging. Just statements to make the receiver feel that they are being validated and they're being whatever they are going through, you can understand that, right? So these are statements that you can apply in your communications using empathy. All right, so how can leaders encourage empathy in the workplace? Okay, so based on research, today's successful leaders must have these two qualities. They need to be more person-focused and be able to work well with people from varying departments or diverse backgrounds. In the working environment, keeping calm and collected at work is considered as prime professional is considered the prime and professional composure to maintain. Leaders must remember that all employees pride themselves to professionalism in the workplace. They try to keep their emotional state under wraps at all times, but unfortunately, by not feeling encouraged uh, to bring their full authentic selves to work, their potential can be lost through the process. For leadership and management leaders, from HR directors to executives and team leads, to be effective leaders, I would say they need to integrate empathy into their communication with their team members. Improving organizational culture first starts by improving relations with the people within it. Since organizations are about people, they should be given a chance to both create value and be valued at work. The impact of this recognition from one's team goes a really long way in establishing that loyalty and trust in them. So employees want to feel the belonging and connection at work, and that relies on treating each other with empathy. Trust building can start with checking in with your employees on a regular basis and how they are feeling with big changes or sudden changes that is happening at work. Leaders and managers can encourage to give time and attention to team members to foster greater empathy, which can in turn enhance overall performance and improve the effectiveness at perception when it comes to identifying the emotions and the feelings of the people to work with. By emphasizing the importance of emotional intelligence in the workplace, your people can engage in their EQ and in their soft skills that will make them be fully themselves at work. Empathy is one of the I would say one of the pillars on which a lasting, sustainable, and supportive office culture is built. Empathy can help you build a strong rapport with your clients, business heads, and peers. If you're a customer-centric business, then empathy would help you create a comfortable, trusted, and authentic work environment. So displaying empathetic leadership can take many shapes and forms. We recommend leaders to take the following steps to show greater empathy in the workplace with their colleagues and direct reports. The first one would be watch for signs of burnout in others. Because this is one of the biggest problems that employees are facing at work. And it's, it's their experience greater risk, especially during the times of pandemic and intense, where there's a lot of intense pressure and stress that comes in. People are more stressed, putting more hours at work than before, finding it difficult to separate work and home life. Managers who are skilled in empathetic leadership are able, when they are able to recognize the signs of overwork in others before burnout becomes an issue that results in disengagement and turnover. It's important to take note of all these things. So, even though if it means taking a few extra minutes each week to check in with your team members on how they are coping with their workload, help them to recover from their burnout as well by understanding them a little bit deeper. Okay, the second one would be show sincere interest in the needs and hopes and dreams of other people. Part of leading with empathy involves working to understand unique needs of goals of each team members and how to best match their work assignment to contribute to both work performance and employee satisfaction. Team members who see their manager who recognizes them, they are more willing to go an extra mile in whatever they're doing. Okay, the third one would be demonstrate a willingness to help an employee with personal problems. I know this can be quite tricky sometimes, but where there are boundaries between work and personal life. So empathetic leaders who understand that their team members are dynamic individuals who are shouldering personal problems while having to maintain their professional responsibility. If they recognize this, as a part of their role to lead and support team members when they're needed the most, keeping boundaries in communication and encouraging transparency is a good way to foster psychological safety and help members to feel more comfortable when sharing their personal challenges whenever it's necessary. So the fourth one would be show compassion when it comes to when people disclose personal loss. Real connections and friendship at work matters. Okay, and empathetic leadership is a tool that managers can use to establish bonds with those the privilege with those they're privileged to lead. We've all been through personal loss, so even with what we can't relate to, or when someone is going through that loss, our team members, having the understanding for our team members and acting empathetically can let them know that they feel supported. Okay, so these are some of the things that I feel is really important in to create an empathetic leadership. So hopefully, I'm sorry, I think is hopefully I've by now, empathy is actually under your control. And I challenge all of us to be more empathetic in whether it's at home or with your colleagues at work. Empathize with a purpose, especially when it's hard to, to show that we really care, to go the extra mile, and you don't know how to do it, but just being supportive with your colleagues. I feel like trying to understand them from their perspective or what they're struggling with at work. It encourages just a more healthy working environment. It's really, really important for us to um, to understand, even though sometimes some people might anger us in a way that that we can't comprehend, but just know that this anger comes from a place where they feel that they're probably burnout, or they feel frustrated about a certain thing. So it's important to understand the perspective of others. Okay. If more of us make a collective effort to use empathy and mend the tears in our social fabric, uh, it's good news. People will have a more healthy work environment, a more balanced, supportive work environment. Empathy is definitely a precious resource and a renewable one for you. So right now we have come to the end of our webinar today. If there's any questions that I can address right now, I'll be happy to answer these questions. Um, okay, so some people did ask me, can empathy be taught? Yes, there are three things that you can do that may help you build your empathetic abilities right away. But the best one I would say is to start to observe your surroundings, especially the people around you. Um, I would say number one is mirroring. There are two types of mirroring exercises, which is physical and emotional. Okay. What I meant by mirroring is look at the verbal and non-verbal disclosure, and understand why is this person reacting the way they are reacting, so that can make you understand them better. Active listening is also called empathetic reflective listening. It's making conscious effort to understand or hear what the other person is saying, and how the message is being sent to you. Okay, the last one I would say is communication style profiling. The best way to display empathy towards those whose communication style does not match with yours would be for you to learn to communicate with them on their terms. So if you understand how they give and receive information, you'll be able to communicate more effectively and more empathetically. The next question I would say that's mostly asked would be, what develops or deepens empathy? This is quite easy, I would say. Through traveling and observing things around you, reading books, watching movies, stories, listening to stories, looking at art, having pets, previous similar experiencing can deepen empathy. I hope these questions can help you have a clear understanding on how you can demonstrate empathy. All right, so we have come to the end of our webinar. I hope you have learned a thing or two through this webinar, and I hope to see you again in our next one. All right, thank you for your time, and we'll see you in our next webinar.
Thank you, Zahira, for the insightful webinar. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.